Yes, it's important to be set up for success in general. But I do think that sometimes you just kind of need to take a leap and just kind of make things work. Because at the end of the day, there's always a reason for why everything in the world is not going to work for one reason or another, right? We've basically expanded pretty rapidly to a peak of doing more than 300,000 bookings every single day. So kind of moving people around and moving them around across 20 countries across the world. And we listed on NASDAQ in the US in March 22 as the first kind of MENA unicorn and basically the only mass transit tech platform to list on any exchange globally. At some point, again, part of that learning curve becomes more on the kind of the personal side of how do I take everything I learned and try to apply it in a high stake environment where I have a lot of accountability, ownership, etc., where you can really kind of go from, okay, I'm advising and consulting and providing pros and cons and structuring things, explaining, to I'm actually going to live through it, I'm going to implement it, I'm going to bear the consequences, kind of good or bad, I'm going to have the upside and the downside for it. I think that's another part of the kind of the journey and the learning that comes with it.
What I'd really like to start with is just like an overview of your career journey and the pivotal moments in your career.
Definitely. So I started when I was in university at the American University in Cairo. I did an internship with QInvest, which is basically kind of the largest investment bank out of Qatar, which I was very fortunate to do because I think it's always easier to land the job off the back of an internship than actually off the back of interviews. So this converted into a full-time job upon graduation. I think this was the first piece that kind of was really helpful, the internship to full-time conversion piece. I then spent 4 years with QInvest in Doha in Qatar. And then off the back of that, I moved to Moelis, which is a US kind of based investment bank. And I was based in Dubai and did that for kind of the following kind of 7 years, kind of 5 years full-time and then 2 years part-time advisory next to kind of being the CFO of SWVL. I think what really helped in the move from QInvest to Moelis is that QInvest itself was going through an inflection point where basically the investment bank we were doing both the kind of the classic investment banking, i.e. financial advisory work, but we were also having our own principal investments, both that allows us to do private equity and private credit under the same umbrella, right? So that more of kind of merchant banking approach, which meant that you kind of could potentially be a bit more well-rounded in terms of doing credit, doing kind of etc., and doing it both as an advisory and as kind of own principal deployment, and same with equities, etc. So and then the opportunity kind of arose with Moelis, which started originally in the region, much more focused on restructuring. So hence that kind of credit background proved helpful. And then as I joined Moelis also went through its own kind of transformation because we landed the lead role on the Aramco IPO and the ADNOC kind of transformation program, which then meant there was a full-on launch of kind of M&A and capital market activities with Moelis, right? And then with Moelis, I was basically fundraising for SWVL out of Moelis. So kind of we used to take on as well kind of capital advisory mandates for startups, especially Series B, C, IPO, and these SPACs. And that's how I ended up transitioning to kind of SWVL full time. So I think again, here I was very kind of fortunate that transitioning again from the inside in a way. The first time was like internship to full time. This time was like advisory to kind of to in-house. So spent kind of a couple of years with SWVL as CFO while still being a part-time advisor to Moelis. And then after that, again, I was very fortunate that ADNOC was one of my biggest kind of clients on the Moelis side because of basically that transformation program. So then they kind of wanted to consider kind of options for AIQ, the AI business of ADNOC, whether as an IPO or as a potential merger. And then because I was advising ADNOC out of Moelis, and at the same time I had the kind of the going public experience with SWVL on NASDAQ, that kind of became hopefully a relevant combination. So again, it was a bit of a move from the inside, and then transitioned SWVL into kind of a board role as I did that. Joined AIQ as CFO. We ended up basically merging AIQ with Precise, which is another Abu Dhabi AI listed company. And then again, did my final move on the inside, moving from CFO of ADNOC to kind of to ADNOC Drilling, which is another subsidiary of ADNOC. Again, utilizing the fact there was inside kind of shared board members and shared kind of a lot of constituencies between AIQ and ADNOC Drilling. So I guess thankfully it's been a story of kind of just being in the right place at the right time and being able to make these internal moves, kind of bypassing more difficult external processes.
You're an expert when it's doing internal moves, and I think there's a lot to share in terms of insights for any young professional or any professional watching us on how to leverage where you are now to go into that next step in your career. I'll start with a bit of the early phases of your career, because I'm curious, I'm in a similar phase as well. you spent 8 years in that corporate
Yes.
environment, and it's not just any corporate environment, it's investment banking,
Yes.
which is one of the most intense industries.
Yeah.
How did that feel? Because I know that investment banking, the average tenure for, especially now, is becoming shorter and shorter. Graduates are working for a year and a half, maximum 2, and then doing that shift to a startup or private equity. So what kept you going, and what was your motive to stay in investment banking and not do a shift earlier?
I think that intensity point you mentioned is really a critical thing. Now, whether it's investment banking, whether it's startups, whether it's private equity, whether it's anything else, all of these things can be very intense.
Yes.
And at the beginning, intensity is directly proportional to learning, right? Because at the end of the year, at the end of the day, early stages, what you're trying to do is trying to learn as much as possible, right? And trying to get your hands on as many projects, many assignments, many transactions, whatever it is as possible. And that's a direct relationship to how much effort and time you put in and how many things you get to kind of to work on, right?
Yes.
And specifically the advantage of investment banking is, I think, combines two kind of very great things. On one hand, you are building kind of a subject matter expertise in something, which is structuring, valuation, diligence, kind of financials, all of that. But at the same time, you're applying this kind of very verticalized expertise across a very wide range of industry sectors, business models, countries, regulations. And hence you develop a decent combination of being vertically very strong in one thing, which is finance, a strong individual contributor in that. But at the same time, you have a breadth of industry, sector, and geographic experience, allows you to kind of become more well-rounded, see more perspectives, learn from more people. So that's very helpful. Second is you also tend to, because you're working by definition on transactions, which most of the time are transformational for the corporates and the counterparts you're working with their boards or their senior management, etc., which means from the beginning, you're learning from the very best. On one hand, you're doing your job, which is the structuring finance part of it, but then you're learning how they're approaching their business, the business models, the growth, the plans, the profitability, the boardrooms, the dynamics, and hence you're learning so much kind of continuously on the go. And then you always have the renewed excitement, right? That every few months, every few weeks, you have a new deal, it's a new country, a new business, so you're going to a new place, you're a new company, you're visiting. For that kind of excitement factor is kind of always there. The network is pretty great as well, because again, as part of every deal, not only do you have a client, you have a counterpart, you have the lawyers, the bankers, the accountants, the regulators, the listing, exchange, etc. So there are so many people that you're working with on every single deal. So you're developing kind of these relationships, and all these relationships, again, like we discussed, end up being extremely helpful, right? Because someone who worked with you, worked across you on a deal, would kind of love to work with you again, would recommend you, etc. Would really allow you to progress. I think, regardless of whether it's banking, consulting, whatever it is, but I think it's important to try at the beginning to be in something that is, as you said, intense, I think is the key word, to build up this learning.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, that's also a great thing about banking, right? Is that you have this agility of moving between, especially if you work for a bank that's kind of a multi-practice. So you're doing M&A, restructuring, capital markets, capital raising, private markets, etc. So you would end up doing different things in different markets and basically learning from these cycles and kind of and benefiting from that.
I think a natural transition, or like a question I want to ask from here, is you were in that super intense corporate environment, always learning, different transactions, different stakeholders, but then SWVL crossed your path. I'm sure it wasn't an easy decision, right? Yes. You're in Dubai, a very well-paid investment banking job. You're in your mid to late 20s.
Yes.
And someone tells you, you know what, come with us as a CFO. And it's tough to predict where a startup would go. So walk us a bit through this decision, and why did you say, yes, I will go to SWVL?
I think there's a few things. I think one is no one controls when opportunities arise, right? So I think in general, yes, you can always say, okay, this is, I want to do this first and do this, but the opportunity is not going to wait for you, right? And SWVL was kind of the first ever Egyptian company to go public in the US, was effectively the first kind of ever kind of MENA unicorn to go public, and lots of different things, right? And then it's not going to wait for you. So first of all, I think I do believe that you grab opportunities, right? It's not about whether you're ready, whether it's the right time. It's about, is the right opportunity, and if it's yes, kind of we go for it. Second is, I think at the end of the day, at the beginning, you're building kind of this very steep learning curve in the technical side, right? Trying to apply it as kind of as broadly as possible. Then at some point, again, part of that learning curve becomes more on the kind of the personal side of how do I take everything I learned and try to apply it in a high stake environment where I have a lot of accountability, ownership, etc., where you can really kind of go from, okay, I'm advising and consulting and providing pros and cons and structuring things, explaining, to I'm actually going to live through it, I'm going to implement it, I'm going to bear the consequences, kind of good or bad, I'm going to have the upside and the downside for it. I think that's another part of the kind of the journey and the learning that comes with it. Third is also as an investment banker, the focus is on the kind of on the finance side, right? In terms of structuring, valuation, diligence, etc. And obviously these are very critical aspects of M&A, of capital markets, of corporate finance. But at the end of the day, that's not the full finance value chain, right? The full finance value chain also has accounting, has controls, has strategy, has governance, has corporate performance, has treasury, has investor relations. And at some point, again, you kind of want to try to say, okay, I've developed a lot of vertical expertise in M&A and capital markets, but how do I round this out with more of that? And again, it's not going to come every day that someone is going to offer, because at the end of the day, someone, a listed company or a company going public, okay, I may need someone with accounting experience, controls experience, public company experience. So the fact that I was on the inside raising allowed me to build a certain level of trust. Fourth is, I think it's extremely important at the end of the day who you work with, right? Because at the end of the day, it's the people. And I got extremely fortunate throughout my career with people I've worked with in every single kind of job that have really gave me a massive platform to be able to grow on. And SWVL was, again, one of these opportunities, right? Working with Mustafa, his brother, is the founder, and like being able to go to work with him and again have that platform to kind of go together was a major attraction. So for me was like, I think ultimately you kind of, you feel it's kind of it's the right opportunity. You can get that. Yes, no one can guarantee the outcome. Of course, can guarantee the outcome. But I think also, ultimately, if you work very hard and you try to kind of be good at what you do, opportunities will arise, right? So even if you make a move and for reasons outside your control, etc., it doesn't work out, or you make mistakes, doesn't work out, you can always, it's not like yes, job security is essential and is important, but you also take a leap based on, you say, I trust myself, I'm going to do this. If it doesn't work out, maybe I can go back, maybe I can find something else.
And what I'm interested to delve into a bit is, your experience in investment banking was, as you mentioned, focused on specific themes, or when it comes to finance, like valuation.
Yes.
But then you shifted to a much more broader role where you have all these things you mentioned, the governance, the corporate finance, the basically the chain end to end.
Yes.
How did you, of course, making that shift is not easy. And were you like questioning yourself, oh, am I able to, like, how did that feel of shifting from a very specific role to a much broader one when it comes to that shift, basically?
Yeah, look, I think, first of all, I think, yes, it's important to be set up for success in general. But I do think that sometimes you just kind of need to take a leap and just kind of make things work. Because at the end of the day, there's always a reason for why everything in the world is not going to work for one reason or another, right? But at the end of the day, say, okay, like as long as, okay, I have a foundation, that's for example, you have other people in the organization, like you're not going in, by the way, you know nothing about it, you're not an accounting expert and there's no accounting expert in the organization. Of course, that's a recipe for failure. But you go in, maybe you're not an expert in accounting, but you can bring in someone who's very strong and you can empower them with a platform, and in return they can allow you to kind of do that. That becomes a big thing, right? So for me, what's about this is about, okay, can I, maybe I'm not the expert, and no one's going to be the expert in everything. So at the end of the day, if you are moving and progressing, by definition, it means you are moving to things that you don't necessarily master, right? And a lot of the multinationals would move people around constantly all the time into new areas and would not necessarily keep you in your vertical track. Because at the end of the day, what people value over time is your problem solving, and analytical thinking, is your ability to bring the right resources, to understand the problem and what it needs, and then go and hire and find the right talent and bring them in and inspire them and motivate them and empower them to do that. So for me, what's much more important than do I know how to do it or not is, do I have the right network? Do I have the right attitude to go and find people who can do it, give them the right empowerment and platform and motivation structure for them to perform it? That's really the key thing.
Yes, and it seems from what you're saying, you had that conversation with Mustafa, right? Like, this is what I can bring to the table, and you had that trust relationship. And I think when it comes to startups, people always come before skills. Like, it's much of a important priority compared to your skills. So definitely having the right people and having that chemistry with the founder, and so I think that's what is also very important. It seems you evaluated that before making a move, which is important for someone watching. I think it's a great tip of talk to that founder,
Exactly.
see if that there's this chemistry, then don't worry about what the gaps are, because you will figure it out if you have the right people backing you up, basically.
Exactly. And that's, again, I think that's the important thing, a step back again into having that network as much as you can, because again, these things, what you're saying is absolutely right. It is very difficult to do in like an informal interview process, very difficult to do on like Teams calls, right? But I had the privilege of having been working with Mustafa for 2 years on fundraising before. So if you're trying to weather through consulting, advisory, part-time, being part of a consulting business, just networking, events, conferences, etc., it's just general connectivity, spend more time with people.
Yes.
By definition, when opportunities arise to do things with these people, you will trust them more, they will trust you more, they will know you, and all of these decisions will be easier and more natural.
Yes, and maybe to give a practical thing, I was just thinking of this. Even if it's a job that you're applying to and you got the offer, you're hesitant, go grab a coffee with your manager, or you can ask for it. Like
people like go in and spend some time in the office and just meet people,
100%.
meet people around, right? Speak to people over there. Like, again, get a feel and sense for it, because as you said, at the end of the day, things will change. Like once you go in, the job responsibilities will evolve, the structure will evolve, things will go through restructuring. But if you feel that this is the right platform, or you have the right empowerment, it's okay. And actually, a lot of times, having things which are not necessarily fully defined, having transformation, having changes, is actually what creates opportunities. Because if you come in and everything is like super clearly defined, you're more likely than not will be confined within a certain box. But actually, if you come in that bit of like constructive chaos, or that bit of like good problems to have, etc., you can actually do a lot and advance a lot by kind of plugging in and solving, expanding your mandate. But again, it only works if you have a team around you that's willing to trust you, to give you that benefit of the doubt, to allow you to kind of to run, to be able to deliver on that.
And can you tell us a bit more about SWVL first? Like whoever doesn't know this, what does it do? And then a bit on your experience and journey, because it's a ride sharing idea and it was a B2C first. So you were hit by COVID, you had many challenges along the way. Walk us through this interesting journey in SWVL.
So basically, at the highest level, SWVL is an Uber for minibuses or minivans, right? So 99% of the people globally cannot afford to have their own car, to take a cab, to take ride hailing, right? And hence they're kind of blocked out of that convenient, reliable experience that kind of the other more fortunate 1% is able to enjoy, or even less than 1%. And then they're kind of forced to choose between the public bus, which outside developed markets is very unreliable, like more than 85% harassment on public buses in emerging markets, etc. Or basically to choose between kind of, let's say, some of the private minivans, again, informal, unsafe, etc. So SWVL basically comes in and replicates the exact Uber experience. The only difference is when you book, instead of basically a car coming under your house, you walk for 5 minutes around the corner and get on a private minibus that's basically fully certified, that's air conditioned, that's very reliable. When you're checking in, you have like almost like your boarding pass, etc. So you get a really affordable life experience. And the idea basically is to allow everyone to be able to go to school, go to work reliably, conveniently, and affordably, regardless of their income level. We've basically expanded pretty rapidly to a peak of doing more than 300,000 bookings every single day. So kind of moving people around and moving them around across 20 countries across the world. And we listed on NASDAQ in the US in March 22 as the first kind of MENA unicorn, and basically the only mass transit tech platform to list on any exchange globally. Unfortunately, after that, we had a downturn because of kind of global markets, the rise in interest rates, the war, etc. Obviously, the kind of the pullback from venture, from ultra high growth, etc. So we had to kind of do a transition where we basically focus more on shifting the majority of the business towards B2B. So still ultimately serving the same mission, but rather than you having to book, it's your school, corporate, university, airline, etc. that's booking on your behalf. And that basically allows you to create more kind of sticky and more contracted revenues. We got the business to profitability, and now the business has been kind of net income positive and kind of cash flow break even for the last kind of 2 years.